now I'm back and I'm very happy of that, because indeed for us it's quite clear that the success of the climate agenda, and in particular of action, rests on us taking collaborative engagements together. Of course, we need national governments, but I know I speak to be convinced the action at subnational level is critical to really take and bring about the change, the transformative change that we need to see. This is something that the European Union has been convinced of for a very long time, not least because our own experience within the EU has clearly shown that it's only when cities and local authorities do take decisive action that we actually see sustainable change on the ground. That's why within the European Union and in our engagement with partners, we always promote this concept of multi-level governance. And of course, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy is for us one of the most politically relevant and city-led initiatives that is helping us to really drive home this message. We need multi-level governance partnerships. We need cities and local authorities in order to be able to translate our commitments into practice. And I believe that the Regional Mayors Forum of the Covenant that has been launched is critical to this end, and we really strongly support in this initiative. It will offer, it's a key element that will offer the opportunity to mayors in the region to interact with the national governments, but also with the African Union critically. And of course with the group of African negotiators. And I think that's a very useful way of bringing the knowledge and expertise and action that cities are actually implementing to the international fora and of course the COP and COP28 in particular. We have worked since back in the days, back in 2015, with local authorities networks here in Africa to support indeed the Global Covenant of Mayors chapter in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we also have launched a Cities and Climate in Africa facilities that have really helped unleash some of the finance that is available for cities and translate that into bankable projects. And I'll come back to that later. Of course, we're working very closely with our member states in the European Union and the financing institutions that we will not name here for the risk of missing some, but it's a truth in Euro spirit because the European Union as a whole is behind this concept of action at the city level. The support that we have been providing over the years, which I think has been quite transformative, has really been on two levels. One, on the technical skills level, trying to build the capacity of local African authorities to identify climate change impacts and risks, but also actions that need to be taken and organize them, if you wish, in plans, sustainable energy and climate action plans that are necessary in order for us to be able to move forward with action. And of course, the second pillar is at least as important, and I'm sure many of you will argue that it's even more important, and that's bridging the gap in access to finance for local authorities and cities across the continent. And there we have supported the preparation of studies that are really trying to link up the Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan of cities and local authorities themselves with the funding instruments that we have available, such as the City Gap Fund that is working very closely with the Covenant of Mayors. We have explored new ways of collaborating and mobilizing innovative financial sources and really trying to use our technical assistance capacity and the experience we have in the EU to bring change and create an enabling environment for cities to accelerate action at the level. At the local level, that is of course critical for meeting the climate ambition that governments have. I think we have very clear results. You have mentioned a few at the beginning. Over the past few years, the financial support that we have been able to lend to prepare studies and feasibility studies for investments at the local level, both through the Covenant of Mayors in Sub-Saharan Africa and the City Investment Facility, has allowed to leverage a commitment of 1.4 billion euro for transformative investments in over 50 cities on the continent. Of course, this is the start. We know we have a long way to go, but we have the instruments. We need to scale them out now. It is only by empowering cities that's quite clear for us to access the resources that they need in order to create the cascading positive effect that we need to see. And that's exactly what we're trying to do with the various initiatives that we are bringing forward in the Team Europe spirit and in the context of the Global Covenant of Mayors. We are now thinking about this next phase of how we can support you in moving further in the climate implementation agenda. And we're looking at how we can further enhance the access to finance and the instruments that we have. I mentioned the fund, the GAP fund, but we also have the European Fund for Sustainable Development Plus, which is an instrument that is really aiming at leveraging private sector investments and de-risking investments as well for the green and digital transitions. We do have a cities and urban development window under the EFSD Plus. So our next challenge is to make sure that we connect the dots and that we are able to help you access these resources more easily. Of course, innovation is critical, and that is also why we are partnering up and we have launched the Innovate for Cities initiative, and I would really invite all of you to join an online event that the Global Covenant of Mayors is organizing on the 10th and 12th of October. I'm sure you can find the information, but I'd be happy to provide it. It's really going to be a global marketplace, if you wish, and a unique opportunity to bring cities, investors, and innovators together in the same space to galvanize and catalyze this type of partnerships that we need to see across the different actors in order to really scale up local climate action. I think we have a very clear vision on how we want to move forward with you to make sure that local authorities and cities can really help achieve the ambition on climate mitigation and adaptation that we have to see in this critical decade in order for us to be able to meet the Paris Agreement temperature goal. So I'm really looking forward to the discussions today, not only to the intervention of the distinguished panelists that are sitting with me, but of course also to the World Cafe discussion we will be having later on. I believe there will be many good ideas that will emerge, and I will be certain to take them back to Brussels and consider them in the next phase. Thank you very much for your attention and for inviting us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Scobie. We have been joined by Dr. Mahmoud Mohaldin, the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion, COP27 Presidency. Thank you for joining us. To make his intervention now, and in particular to hear from you in terms of the wisdom and insight you've been showing in your role around finance. Whenever we hear you speak, Dr. Mohaldin, it is about action and moving money. So that's what we want to hear more about today, please.
Right, thank you so much. Talking about finance tends to be a bit boring sometimes, especially if you are talking about and not finding much of a response as you would like to see, and people talk more about gaps of finance rather than what they can really be doing better with the money. But actually, I'm going to localize the discussion from the global trillions and billions to the requirements of a typical city and town. And it could be just my lucky day today, because I've been receiving messages, including from a fund that I helped establishing before I left the World Bank, which is called the SDG Fund. And actually, in this very day, they sent me a message saying that today can have a neutral witness. The SDG Fund empowering local communities to achieve the SDGs Alliance. So this came from them today. Proud of what they are doing, linking sustainable development to installing solar-powered devices in roofs in local communities in Africa and Latin America. And then you consider what you can really be doing more at the local level, because at the end of the day, you can be in some global city, but it's your neighborhood, your local community that will have an impact on your safety, on your education, on your health service as well. And during the last few months, in a visit to a very nice place, which is the Egyptian answer to Cape Town in Africa, and I would say Cape Town is the South African answer to the Cape in the north of Egypt, which is observing the great beauty of getting the River Nile linked to the Mediterranean. I admire that place a lot, to the extent that I was wandering with a couple of friends, 10:30 p.m. in February 22nd. So, and then with super excitement, I slipped because of it's a very slippery edge, and I fractured my knee. So what happened then? I was lucky to see some good, adequate health service to support me immediately. I was not in need to be shipped 200 miles as originally planned by a couple of colleagues, because they discovered because when we got into that visit, we're not really looking for health centers or one-day hospitals. We're just trying to see the beauty of the place. But I discovered a great deal of support, and then got some decent treatment in Cairo, the center. Then after that, I went to DC. They told me everything they did in Cairo and in that city of Ras Al Bar, we cannot do better than, which made me as an Egyptian proud. And then they said, but we need to continue the therapy. So I went to a place in Slovakia, it's basically, I was just alerted to, I can show you pictures as well, from a place called Pistachio, I think. It's northeast of the capital. One of the best, God forbid if you have any problem, I'm not taking commissions from them, but they did a good job. It's a semi-rural, semi-urban area. As many places in Africa, including my town in the Delta, you cannot call it really 100% urban or 100% rural. As my colleagues at the back in the days and at the bank, they call it rurban, because it has a mix of rural contribution to the place, and then you still have all of these internet and satellite dishes, and you watch football in Europe and beyond while you are enjoying looking after your cows and donkeys, as I do when I go back home. But the whole thing here is basically about an ecosystem that shouldn't really be a privilege of the center. And we're talking about climate finance, when we, as I was saying during that global stock take exercise, it's a challenge to say climate finance is developed finance 2 years ago. Now it's not. And I'm happy if anybody has still a kind of a siloed approach to the matter, that they consider climate finance is different from development finance. You'll be proving wrong by top economists, by top development practitioners, and if you are just happy enjoying your silo, that silo is being challenged, is being contested, because in whatever you do in climate action, you are dealing with lives and livelihood. You are dealing with poverty. You are dealing with investment in skills and human capital. You are dealing with matters related to access to energy, or access to better food, or access to water, and dealing with all of these kind of challenges. It's great to have professionals. Actually, I put that controversial slogan that we need silos to protect professionalism. But we don't need really to compromise that in order to say that climate finance is development finance. I need to have the top-notch people in finance and mitigation. We don't need here a generalist. We need really some people who would really understand the typical issues of concern. But at the same time, they need really to know that they are part of a bigger ecosystem that will not just stop because of them not really going to play a game, because now the world is moving faster than what they think. Having said that, and I'm hoping that I'm not offending anybody in their own profession, but and that's not the intention. So we got into this kind of manual that I'm encouraging everybody, including many friends here, especially the mayors, and Jean-Pierre is here, about municipalities' finance, in what you are going to be spending and how you are going to be generating the funds from. And here I had a very good discussion in Salzburg about the same topic. And I can tell you from that discussion, we had many challenging questions. We need to spend, but we are not getting any kind of resources of funding. There is an essential reading. It's a manual for municipalities. And in that essential reading, you need really to see what you are spending here. You are spending in more than 12 areas. Some of them are related to energy, and social development, water management, housing that requires all of the stuff that you need to know about adaptation and investing in resilience. So you have 12 areas of work including to spend, including wages, healthcare, social assistance, public order, infrastructure, from where the money is coming. If you are not doing that, if you are a mayor and you don't have access to these resources, you need really to go and check where the sources of funds are. Because in a typical town and a city in Africa, you will be seeing the following. You will be dependent on some levy on ordinary citizens and some transfers from the capital. That is not sustainable. But you need to have some access, including to property taxes. Real estate taxes should be a local one. This is not negotiable. Unfortunately, many cities, many towns, and many villages are denied this essential source of funding. Ministry of Finance collects, they may consider reallocating the funds. This is very inefficient. Real estate tax is one of the main sources of funding at the local community, including in areas related to investing in resilience. Then you can really do a variety of other taxes on local businesses, on electricity consumption, here an incentive issue, on issues related to tolls on the roads, on the bridges. But everything that you will be spending, even in a tax form in your local community, you will be feeling that it is a kind of a contribution that is going to be coming back to you directly. The same should be going with the rest of the taxes. That's why the Nordics and some of the Europeans in the room are happy, they should be, that they are paying taxes, but the revenue is coming back to them in better quality of life, in education, health, better mass transportation. Instead of bragging about your car alone and all of that, you will be enjoying this kind of mass transportation, better if it is going to be electric, better if that electric is going to be powered by one of the solar sources or renewable sources. Because the challenge of, with my daughter, I live in Bethesda near Washington, and say, well, I got a Tesla just to prove that I am pro this, that. I would say, well, you should be mindful that a great deal of electricity injected in your car is coming from a coal mine somewhere in neighborhoods of Virginia. So here is basically about how you invest in the whole supply chain. But the problem here is basically about this issue of localization. First, being practical here. If you are not really decentralized, don't be worried. Now, it is not the old jargon of centralization versus decentralization. I know some friends who did PhDs in this topic. It's a waste of time if you do it now. It's all about localization. Because the center has a comparative advantage that you cannot compete with if you are in town. But the town and the city has comparative advantages that you cannot really compete with if you are in the system, in the center, assuming that you can reach typical households with better service and better attention to them. So let's kill this kind of waste of time dichotomy, another dichotomy of the center versus the periphery. There is no periphery. Every place is a center when it needs to be. Every place should be valid accordingly. But you need really to support that with adequate finance, public and private. You need to support that with adequate business environment. And when I was mentioning the health services that you will not find in the capital, in the case of Egypt or Slovakia, better than what you got in the rural, urban, semi-rural, semi-urban areas. You get a better quality of attention, world-class they call it. They promote themselves in that place in Slovakia as a world-class therapy that they can really compete with any other place and with a fraction of a price, because the turnover and the cost of living for the neighborhood is much less than what you can pay in New York or in not very far in Prague. What I was trying to say here, how can we be practical about the talk here? Every report I got during the last couple of days about financing cities, dwellings, villages is being compromised and being crowded out. Every report on adaptation, which is basically at the core of the business of cities and towns and villages, we're not having enough of. You believe these numbers, the 11 billion for Africa, I mentioned that now for the third time today. 11 billion is what we got in climate finance. Based on our NDCs, we need 5 times that much, but based on experts, they say that we need at least 10 times of that. How much you can really mobilize without public-private partnership, without relying just on donors, without relying on the 100 billion that will never come in full. Actually, the report that could come this year is going to tell you that we are closer to the 100 billion than ever before. But I would challenge the methodology like our friends in Oxfam that will tell you that this 100 is not really that 100 that we count. It could be closer to 20 or 30 billion rather than 100 billion. You can have another discussion about that because there had been a great deal of double counting and a mix of grants and loans and investment that should be a lesson for the global stock take, especially at the local level, and then you get that in the new numbers of 2025. And then after that, after fixing this kind of a political challenge, and you need to mobilize resources and you need to get the citizens right, here you have 2 things in preparation for that urban big event that Egypt will be hosting next year in November. And with the help of UN Habitat, the UN system, our friends with Mr. Mbassi and his colleagues. But here we have 2 cities challenging my team in the champions. I'll be leaving you by then, but I'll be monitoring you or praying for you from a distance. I'm finishing this function in December. So we picked a city in Mozambique, another city and town in Egypt. We have the Sharm el-Sheikh adaptation agenda with its operational areas of work in water, agriculture, settlements, and all of that. And we're going to be getting those cities as follows. We're going to be using the UNDP in order to have an integrated framework, not national, but local framework. And that would be a first of a kind. I'm not familiar with one single case of an integrated national financial framework that's done at the local level to be local then. And then we'll be getting all of the partners from the UN system, from the private sector, from donors, and from the champions team, and all of the money that we can mobilize, even in investment, because some of the areas of work will be commercially feasible. Others will not. And then we'll showcase all of that initially at COP28, so we need to be prepared. And then more in a full fashion, we'll be doing that when we are meeting for that big event. It's just a simple case that and we are not really inviting them to places without hardships. That city in Mozambique had been suffering a lot because of the cyclone. The other city that I know of is suffering from a variety of issues, including bureaucratic hurdles. And how we are going to getting that model financed as a model of resilience and adaptation instead of just talking about empty models, or we can just talk. If we are just interested, we can always pick a nice city in Europe, call it Vienna or Copenhagen, and say these are the best cities in the world and stop at that. These cities need to be transformed, and these cities with investment in resilience, linking climate adaptation finance with development finance, the transformation can be there, and we'll be showing these models very soon as a contribution from the climate champions and the presidencies of COP27 and COP28 to you all. Having said that, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mahmoud. We're now going to turn to Mr. Philip Kniel, who is the Director of the Africa Directorate of the Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, Germany. And we're privileged to have Philip here in particular too, because BMZ is one of the co-funders of the Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa. But we're also aware, Philip, of course, that you oversee a much larger portfolio of work within Africa, and we look forward to hear your inputs. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and first of all, apologies for being late. And it's a great pleasure actually to be here, not only in this session, but at this African Climate Summit. And I think we hear a very positive, solutions-oriented message from this summit going to the world, going to Germany as well, going to the EU, on looking at solutions, working together, trying to use the big potential of renewable energy, of people, of innovation in people's mind in Africa, and for sure also from cities. So this is a great message for us. and actually we want to also respond to that offer, to that African offer you're giving. And we are really happy that we could be part of this summit, of this conference at least, listen to you and will work to take these things forward. Now, when it comes to implementation, it is certainly the cities which are again at the centerpiece. 1.5 billion Africans will live probably in urban areas in 2050, more that are now on the continent at all. And this is a big challenge, how to organize it, how to face also the challenges that come from climate change. Germany has a special relation with towns or cities. Actually, citizen rights in Germany have been born in cities. Lots of issues related to human rights, to democracy, have been first tested in German cities when it then spread to other German areas. And so in Germany, the concept of a city, of a town, is something very sovereign. There are taxes, there's a very democratic governance, there's lots of active debate. And this is a little bit also the spirit with which we try to work globally with cities and also the Covenant of Mayors, and take also climate change action and climate change issues forward. There are 3 billion euros of cooperation portfolio in cities in Africa. A lot about infrastructure, but also about technical assistance, planning, as I said earlier, how to work on participation schemes, on resources in cities. And we particularly also work through city networks, which is, for example, Covenant of Mayors, but also ICLEI, also C40. And we try also to promote actually partnerships between German cities and African cities in many respects. So I think we can't overestimate the role of cities in this quest of climate change. Maybe just let me take out two examples. We are working on TUMI, a transformative urban mobility initiative, where we try to work with cities also in Africa on innovative schemes for mobility, where for sure non-motorized transport plays a very essential role, but for sure also electric transport, public transports, and how to integrate it fully in a broader planning of growing cities, which is different actually from Germany, where we have stagnating urban areas, I would say, but still there we can learn a lot from each other. Different challenges, but also actually the very same goals to achieve, especially also adapt to climate change and be a part of climate change mitigation. And finally, maybe also highlighting only one more issue, circular economy in cities is especially important, we think. Is very much related to climate adaptation, to climate mitigation. With the so-called Prevent Waste initiative, we try to bring in also the private sector in this circular economy game, also again within urban areas, within cities in Africa. So thanks a lot for your attention. I know it's late after 3 days of conversations, and 2 days more. Thanks for your attention. Happy to be here with you. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Philip, and in particular for highlighting some tangible examples of real change. We've been encouraged by UNFCCC colleagues to please bring solutions to the table. We know that they're not at the scale they need to be, but let's bring solutions to the table, and I think you did justice to that in particular. We're now going to turn to Ms. Ellen Young, who's the Head of International Programs, Climate and Environment at Bloomberg Philanthropies. And philanthropies play a very essential role in catalyzing change across the world and funding sometimes risky things that other donors may not want to fund. So Bloomberg has supported a lot of city-level work globally and regionally in Africa, and we'd love to hear from you in terms of Bloomberg Philanthropy's plans coming up to COP, but then after that too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here today. Bloomberg Philanthropy is the home of Mike Bloomberg's philanthropic activities. And as the three-term mayor of New York City, I think it shouldn't be surprising that for us, we are a strong believer in the critical role that cities, states, regions play in combating climate change. We are in the process of developing our strategy, our work on climate and energy in Africa. We really benefit from a lot of wonderful partners here. This week we're here to really learn at the Africa Climate Summit, and I have to say that I've been so inspired and encouraged and humbled by the level of creativity and commitments here, and I think I have no doubt that we'll see, as what President Ruto put it, that Africa will be a big part of the provider of solution here. As we develop our strategy here, again, we believe African cities should be at the core of what we do. What we try to think about is how we can unlock the potential of African cities to be not only the an engine of economic development, but also climate solutions. And I think maybe I use my limited time here to introduce a little bit of the ways that Bloomberg Philanthropies normally help unlock climate finance, and then of course want to work with partners here to think about how we will develop strategies that's tailor-made for this continent and could be effective here. The most important thing we always believe in unlocking finance is policy. Case after case, we see that some small change in policies can really unlock big inflow of capitals. And this is from changing in procurement policies to streamlining land lease models that can unlock solar development. And so we think our role is to support cities to develop evidence-based research to identify what are those policies and to help design, how we can roll them out effectively. The second type of role we play is be a catalyst for finance. We need a lot of public and private capital. In comparison, philanthropy funding is tiny. However, we benefit from the fact that we are the most nimble and most risk-taking. But we also face a big challenge of how to be smart. How can we really play the role to leverage much bigger funding? And on that front, we believe that we in addition to promoting the right policy, we can play a very helpful role in prepare the projects. And of course, that's also another thing that Dr. Mahmoud is very actively involved in. Preparing project often means that funding feasibility studies or help improve the bankability of potential projects, help cities design the public tender. And these are the kind of things that can really either help promote pilots or help scale up some of the technologies that has already been experimented. Last but not least, we would like to be the bridge builder and the convener. We mainly do this through our partners such as Global Covenant of Mayors, ICLEI, C40. We think that the most effective way to work in city is through peer learning. When mayors get together, magic happens. So we would like to, and this is especially why that we are very pleased to be one of the hosts of today's event. So thank you so much for having me here.
Me like the mic is there, it is working. Thank you so much for your input. In particular, a standout for me was your reference to policies as levers of change. Many of the mayors in the room that we work with often feel that there is a frustration around policies and plans not leading to action. And I think it's the responsibility of all of us working with cities to make sure that they are those pivotal marks that lead to finance being unlocked. We are going now to turn to Mr. Michael Moenar, who's the Deputy Executive Director of UN Habitat. ICLEI's worked with UN Habitat for many, many years, and UN Habitat plays a central role in the movement of subnational governments, being the agency with the explicit mandate to pioneer sustainable urban solutions. And so we look forward to hear about what UN Habitat is doing in this space. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Good evening to you all, dear colleagues and friends. And indeed, for UN Habitat, these issues of local governments, localization, and of course climate challenges, but also climate solutions, is our bread and butter. It is at the center of our attention. And I have to say that my job is relatively easier, having listened to all other speakers so far, because a lot of the important messages have already been said from colleagues. Of course, in addition to the importance of localization from Mr. Mohaldin, you have also learned that I come from Slovakia, which is a small addition to, of course, to the discussion. Indeed, I served until April of this year for 6 years as Slovakia's ambassador to the UN in New York, and I started in this new position in UN Habitat in April. Localization cannot be overemphasized, as has already been mentioned, and I just wanted to start by mentioning that one of the so-called 12 high-impact initiatives that have been approved for the upcoming SDG summit in New York later this month are precisely on SDG cities and on localization. So bringing the localization perspective to the whole sustainable development agenda, including and in particular climate action, is absolutely crucial. I don't think I need to remind you what happened during the pandemic, and how also we had to learn the hard way how important it is to have local solutions for even some of the most challenging global issues that we are facing. National governments and of course higher level of governance on the regional or on the global level are good at many things, but they are certainly not good at delivering the assistance to the people and supporting the people with the basic needs. For us at UN Habitat, urban planning, urban design, and of course focus on localization, but also focus on basic services that need to be delivered to the people we serve are absolutely crucial. And of course, we are very much committed to multi-level governance that is absolutely crucial also for global climate action. Because we need to collectively ensure that the decision-making and implementation at various levels are really tailored to address local, regional, and also national climate challenges. And again, I am not, of course, criticizing national governments, but we need to realize very well that each of the levels of governance do have their own important roles. National governments, of course, are there to support the local, or if you will, subnational levels with the financing, with the legislation, and with other important aspects that they need. But of course, implementation does happen and does need to happen on that local level. I don't think I also need to remind you that actually as much as 70% of carbon is generated on the city's level. And that's really a strong reminder for all of us globally. And as we see the scale and the level of urbanization, in particular in Africa, we see that the challenges are even more important, and we need to pay even more attention to the same issues here in Africa. We are very much committed to reinforcing the issue of localization in relation to urbanization and to sustainable cities. You may be aware that during the recent high-level political forum in New York in July, we also presented our second SDG 11 report, which in many ways focused on the challenges that we continue facing, and where we need to join efforts to really ensure that we get better results on so many particular aspects, which start with housing and then continue in close relation to housing also to issues such as water, sanitation, energy, waste management, to mention the most important and most challenging ones. Here I have to mention our second UN Habitat Assembly that was held here in Nairobi just a few months ago in June, where we approved 10 important resolutions, including on the issue of climate change, as well as on biodiversity, on housing, on informal settlements, or if you will, on slums. So these things are really closely related. As has already been mentioned, of course, during the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, it was for the first time that we managed to have an important conversation that was focused not only on climate and environment, but also on urbanization. For the first time in Sharm el-Sheikh, and thanks very much to Egyptian presidency, that we managed to bring those actors together. And it's already been mentioned that, of course, we will continue doing the same for COP28. And now I understand it has become a standing agenda item for all the upcoming COPs, even though, as we know, and as you will remember from one of the previous messages delivered by His Excellency President Ruto, he pledged, or he urged all of us that COP28 should probably be the last COP, because we should agree and finalize our work, and that we would not need any further COPs. Well, of course, we know it's a little bit more complicated and challenging than that, but certainly we would like to see that thing happening to the extent possible. We also launched in Sharm el-Sheikh the so-called Surge initiative, which serves as a springboard to coordinate collective action for improved cooperation between the sectoral efforts. So, of course, it's an additional tool that we are bringing to these important initiatives. At the COP28, that important dialogue between the ministers of housing, urban development, environment, and finance, as well as local and regional governments, multilateral banks, and other important actors, will take place on the 6th of December, which is also yet another important aspect, that it has been brought to the early part of the COP, precisely because of its importance. So we very much look forward to meeting with many of you also in Dubai and focus on these issues. Zooming into the African cities, as I have mentioned, they do face disproportionate impact from the global climate crisis. Mr. Mohaldin has mentioned Mozambique, and of course UN Habitat also has worked very closely with Mozambique, but also with Malawi, and also in many other areas of Africa, including the Sahel, on the same issues. And we are assisting the people in those countries to mitigate the risks for the future, and to ensure that we have a comprehensive approach to dealing with situations like that, and also, very importantly, that we learn from the previous crises and that we try to prevent the same thing happening, that we have measures that are adopted so that we don't cry over spilled milk again when a similar natural or other disaster hits. And then only we realize, well, we should have done this or we should have done that. And if you will, in my own language, in Slovak, we have a saying that wise people learn from other people's mistakes. So, you know, even if we see things happening in other parts of the world, it is time for us to learn also about those, even if we are not necessarily immediately facing the same situations. And I'm talking here about floods, I'm talking here about cyclones, or of course other challenges that are crucial. We have worked very closely with mayors, governors, and their organizations worldwide. I will stay away from naming the various platforms or important associations because indeed it is UN Habitat that is the focal point within the whole UN system for cooperation with local and regional authorities. And let me add also something which we are very much excited about, and that will be coming later this month from New York, from the UN, where you will see that we will create additional room for the local and regional authorities to come together with the national governments to look for these important solutions. I don't want to say more because this is still in the making, but you will remember my words maybe when you see the announcement coming up. Through partnerships, we really need to advance further the urban resilience. And I very much like what has been mentioned already, that we actually often are looking not at the differences or the dichotomy between rural and urban, but at challenges which are certainly coupled together in what we can call Rurban, as has been mentioned. We are working also in the context of City Resilience Action Planning tool that has been applied already in 45 locations in Africa. And we are working closely with our sister agency UNEP that is also based here in Nairobi, as well as with the UNDP and other partners. African cities are pivotal to a sustainable, climate-resilient future, but they can't achieve this transformation alone, which is why we are focusing today together, definitely with the Bloomberg philanthropies, on twinning, and we must coordinate all levels of government for inclusive climate action and build the capacities of local governments and unlock financing for adaptation and low-carbon development. We are also working very closely with UNCDF. I will personally be early in October in Malaga for an important conversation that we will be having precisely on how to make even some particular UN funding directly available to the cities, to the mayors, because obviously this is a huge challenge. My last point, which I cannot omit, is the power of youth. And in Africa, this is particularly important. You have seen all over the world, but also, and in particular in Africa, how much the youth drive can be helpful in this particular context, not only for raising awareness, but for important initiatives that really make a huge difference. So let's collectively also redouble our commitment about involving the youth of Africa even more in turning the tide in the right direction. I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So the last agenda item for this panel is a really important one. Mayor Dogbatse, sitting on my right, who is the president of the Regional Mayors Forum of the Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa, will deliver a declaration that we drafted with the Regional Mayors Forum mayors yesterday in an inaugural meeting. He will deliver this declaration in French, so I would encourage those that need headsets to raise their hands. The team will walk around and give headsets out. And then I also just want to preempt the audience that we are going to be true to our word, that we are going to break away into group discussions after the declaration is delivered. We know we are running slightly over time, but we can make it up with a shorter discussion for the interactive session. So please prepare yourselves for that. We don't want to lose the participation, which always tends to occur when we run out of time. Mayor Dogbatse, I hand over to you. You're welcome to deliver from the podium. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à l'assistance. En fait, c'est une déclaration que les maires de la Convention vont donc porter à l'assistance de ce sommet. Nous, gouverneurs et maires, membres du Forum régional des maires de la Convention des maires pour l'Afrique subsaharienne, comme SSA, et représentant les voix de plus de 350 villes d'Afrique subsaharienne, dont la population totale dépasse 150 millions de personnes, faisons la déclaration suivante à l'occasion du sommet africain sur le climat et de la semaine africaine du climat 2023 à Nairobi au Kenya. D'ici 2050, plus de 2 milliards de personnes vivront dans les villes d'Afrique. Un quart des citoyens du monde devaient être africains d'ici 2050. En tant que gouverneur et maire au service des populations africaines, notre priorité est d'accélérer et de débloquer d'urgence l'action urbaine en faveur du climat sur le continent. Nous reconnaissons que l'avenir de notre continent africain dépend de notre action collective pour le climat et d'une collaboration radicale, en particulier entre le Sud et le Nord. Nous affirmons le rôle de chef de file joué par les collectivités locales africaines, avec leurs homologues nationaux, dans la mise en œuvre d'actions de première ligne pour lutter contre le changement climatique. Nous reconnaissons notre rôle en tant que leaders locaux pour mettre en place des solutions locales qui tiennent compte de nos contextes africains uniques. Nous nous engageons à faire entendre une voix africaine unifiée qui lutte pour la réalisation d'un avenir durable, résilient et inclusif pour notre continent. Nous devons financer aussi l'avenir. Pour lutter contre le changement climatique, où les conséquences apparaissent, les financements doivent être dirigés là où ils sont le plus nécessaires, c'est-à-dire au niveau local. Les collectivités locales répondent à l'appel de l'adaptation du changement climatique et à la construction des communautés durables et prospères, en développant des plans intelligents en matière de climat et en identifiant des solutions innovantes adaptées au contexte unique de l'Afrique. À ce jour, 107 plans complets d'adaptation et 86 plans d'atténuation ont été élaborés par les signataires de l'accord SSA. Un total de 310 projets de l'accord SSA provenant de plans climatiques détaillés estimés à 3 milliards d'euros. Je le geste à la parole. Avec 56 projets urbains actuellement soutenus et 280 millions d'euros engagés à ce jour pour un financement direct. Mais il faut aller plus loin. Les mécanismes actuels de préparation des projets ne permettent pas d'obtenir les financements locaux à grande échelle nécessaires.
We ask that there should be enough funds to finance local projects that are which are approved and elaborated by the town. These funds should be distributed transparently and in a viable manner. climatic actions. The African authorities, local, they have objectives, nationals. They should be aligned to national objectives. The measures to fight climatic change must be adapted to the needs of local community, so to avoid errors of adaptation. The local authorities must play a central role in the division of these activities at national level in 2024. So because of this increase in temperatures, which causes destruction on our continent, the improvement of our governance at national level is necessary in a context of our countries.
We know we are talking about the capacity of resources, and for this particular level to actually work to put in place strategies, a plan of actions to bring about changes that the climate change as well. So we call upon this decision of COP28 that is supposed to bring together the inclusion of the government, especially in the planning that we are having in 2024. And for this particular reason, we are calling upon the methodology and the transparency procedures that can be put together to guarantee, to make sure that we work in the same particular platform to bring some representations that is going to be equitable, and it may be mandatory, so that we may work together in terms of participation that ACC has put in place. And energy for future. Africa has got a lot of potential in terms of energies, with over 60% of sources that we have in the world. Africa may be the chief in terms of development and production of energy, of renewable energy, but we have to do it in a very good way, using justice, and no one should be lazy through a very good economical sector. Alors, the Africans must plan their own ways, and we call upon the engagement so that you may respect it and work towards in Africa. And we call upon a transfer, a technological transfer, so that you may move, so that Africa may also go from one level and to another in terms of the energy that we need. As we speak of this, when we talk about access to transition to energy and also the inclusion, for this reason, the transition that we are putting in place, no one is supposed to remain behind. We strongly believe the climate changes, especially about the marginalized group, not through the intermediate of commerce. We shall continue to have discussions on this particular level, especially for the people who are strongly touched and those who have most knowledge. And we shall again use climate changes and the against unfairness, and to create job opportunity and sustainable development as well. I believe that there is a strong need in terms of changes when we speak of the countries in Africa and their nature, and failure to use national resources in Africa, we may not move forward. And since 1970 and 2016, I can assure you there is a need to invest in Africa, and without it we may not move forward. And when we speak about the sector of water that brings about climate change, and this must work together. When we speak about floods, we are facing sicknesses, which is somehow hindrance to development in Africa. And the problem that related to climate change as well. what else can we also contribute, especially to this phenomenon? Yes, we certify that there is need to create a platform for funding, especially when you speak about the carbon, is exactly what His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, the President of the Sovereign Republic of Kenya, and I quote what he said. And I said that the Great Lakes region are also invited to come and to play a strong role towards climate change. For this reason, I want to say this message has been elaborated by the forum, by the mayors forum, represented by the president and the member of GE. I myself, the member that I am. It was made among the lady from Lusaka, Madame Shilando Shitankola, who was there, through the deputy government in Kenya, Mr. Konisa, a representative of a governor in Kenya, and also the mayor of Kampala in Uganda, Mr. Elias Kangu, and also the mayor in Cameroon, Abdallah Mwangi, in my county, and the mayor of Walvispe in Namibia, Mr. Victor Portres, the mayor of Accra in Ghana, Elizabeth Sake, the mayor of Libreville in Gambo, Tomé, the mayor of Kilimani in Mozambique, Dr. Emmanuel Daraju, the mayor of Bangui in the Central Republic, Nakunge. In Ethiopia as well, Mr. Youssef Joan, representing the president of a commission of environment as well, Mr. Abdulrahman, representing Madame Fachi Beton in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And also to finish, just to go through, the governor of Nairobi who said this morning that if Kwame Nkrumah believed in Africa, if Julius Nyerere believed in Africa, and if Jomo Kenyatta believed in Africa, and we can see the results today, we can testify. Even Nelson Mandela believed in Africa. Haile Selassie believed in Africa. Even us as mayors, we can as well believe in Africa. And we can also do much more in Africa. So we should stop with our speeches, but to put actions in place. In other words, walk the talk. And to create something that we can testify, we can leave a legacy. And I thank you all. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Mayor Dogwati, for those inspiring words. We are now going to move into the interactive session. So could I please ask all of the facilitators of the groups to stand? These are our facilitators. If you speak French, please go to the back of the room. Nelson is waving his hand. Say that in French. I can't say that in French. Facilitators will come and group you. We don't really want too much movement so we don't lose participants. Please stay for this. It's vital that we engage with you and get your inputs. So facilitators, can I just ask you to group people around you so that they can speak to their sectoral inputs. And we're going to focus on discussion. We're only going to spend 15 minutes on this item. Are we comfortable? Has everybody got a group and a facilitator? Okay, I'm going to leave it now in the facilitator's hands. You have 15 minutes. We will finish at 6:45. Colleagues, can we round up in 1 minute, please? 1 minute. Okay, we need to wrap up, groups. Thank you so much for such active participation. If we can conclude, please, in the groups, we really do appreciate it. Thank you so, so much. Thank you to all our facilitators. Okay, so I would suggest if people can just turn their chairs to the main podium. We're going to finish with our last panel, which is going to be briefer than expected because one panelist had to leave. Can I invite Jean-Pierre Elongbasi and Hastings Chikoko up to the stage, please? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Please also take the forms with you that the facilitators have so we can continue to receive your inputs. Facilitators that are engaging, we need to start the final panel, please. Okay, so we're now going to turn to the final panel and hear from our city network partners and sister city networks. I'm going to begin with Mr. Hastings Chikoko from C40 Cities, the Regional Director for Africa and the Global Lead for Mayoral Engagement. And then we'll hear from Mr. Elongambasi, and finally from Kobie Brunt, and the session will then be concluded. So let's start with yourself, Hastings, for some concluding remarks and reflections.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to make this remark brief because just like Dr. Mohedin said earlier on, when you talk about financing, he said sometimes it gets boring. Me, sometimes I just become speechless and say, what else do we need to say? We have been really talking about this. Why don't we just get out of this room and just do it? But because I need to just give some remarks, what I'll do is I will just share a message that some of the mayors that are in this room actually agreed on this morning at a mayoral round table, and I think I just like to say to share that with you so that we can walk out of this room with that. But what they have said is that recognizing the importance of cities or local governments in addressing climate change and the contribution that they make to the nationally determined contribution, I think we national governments must empower and enable municipal authorities by implementing nationwide policies that facilitate climate action at the local level. We have heard this before. Let's just go out there and do it. Climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts necessitate substantial financial resources. We also know this. Let's just go and address that. So national governments and international financial institutions need to increase climate financing, set up dedicated city climate finance programs to massively ramp up the financial support for urban climate action. I think that, without necessarily pointing fingers at national government, but this is basically trying to say, how do we work together? How do we twin? And how do we actually shift the needle? And how do we reverse things? So this is what I would like, just a single message I would like to send us out with. We have talked about this. Let's just go and do it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hastings, and particularly for being so succinct. Mr. Elongambasi, the Secretary General of UCLG Africa.
I don't know if I can be as performant as Hastings, because I have a lot to say, because I'm angry. We are making progress, yes. We are being recognized. I remember the privilege of age is that I was the ancestor of all this. I remember in 1996, we were sidelined, never exceeding even the venue. In Paris, even, we were sidelined. They sent us in a remote part of Paris for COP21. So we thought that this recognition will go hand in hand with the means of implementation of our policies, just to discover that we are still sort of tolerated and not on the table. And Kofi Annan said, late Kofi Annan said, the battle for climate change, the fight against climate change will be lost or won in cities. It is very strange that we are still here saying, how do we find money to implement mitigation and adaptation at the local level? This is very strange a situation. So mine is to say that we need to seriously revise the landscape of financing, and we need a window for local governments in all the climate finance institutions. starting with the Green Climate Fund. That is critical. Secondly, we were told that the imbalance between mitigation and adaptation comes from the fact that we don't have metrics for adaptation. So my call is for our researchers and universities, please help us have this matrix, because the priority action for climate in Africa is adaptation to climate change. So we need to raise money at the level of the money raised for mitigation. Just to hear that, oh, we cannot raise that money because we don't know how to measure progress in that. So create metrics, then we'll see. So please prioritize these metrics if we want people to keep their word. Thirdly, we really need to recognize that private sector is not only international private sector. Every city works with private sector, local, regional, national, and international. So we need to really have a conversation with the private sector and all levels of private sector, not only the international. What the people that are coming here are the international private sector. The national and informal private sector are never invited. 60% of your economy is run by informal private sector. Where are they here? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Mbasi. Our final input is going to be from Ms. Kobe Brandt, who is the Regional Director of ICLEI Africa and also the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI. We will play the video from Kobe Brandt now. We're struggling to find the video and we are way over time. So in the interest of that time, I'm going to conclude the session. And on behalf of the Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa, on behalf of Cities Race to Resilience, on behalf of ICLEI, a big thank you to everyone that came and participated in this session, everyone that is online, everyone that will make future inputs into the forms that were handed out. I'm being told that this session was by far the most packed of the opening tracks. And I think what that says is this track at this Africa Climate Week is an absolute priority for the delegates. So let's leave this room, let's honor the call from our two sister city networks to go out and make a change and make action. Thank you to our mayors, thank you to our governors, thank you to the ministers. We close the session.
Distinguished ministers, Your Excellency.
Stay and listen. 5 more minutes, everyone. Thank you. 5 more minutes.
Distinguished ministers, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, honorable mayors, representatives from African cities, and our partners and friends. In July, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres emphasized that this Africa Climate Summit is one of several critical opportunities for demanding and coordinating accelerated climate action and climate justice. He highlighted climate finance as a particular focus of this accelerated action, outlining the course correction required to shift the global financial system that continues to prop up and reward the polluters and fossil fuel industries, driving the dual crisis of climate change and biodiversity. He also emphasized that we need action from leaders beyond governments, from cities, regions, and financial institutions, many of whom are in the room today, here in Nairobi with us. As the example shared today have shown, cities are first responders in the fight against climate change. However, African cities only receive around $3 billion a year in climate finance, amounting to less than 1% of global urban climate finance. Therefore, unlocking climate finance is key to implementing catalytic projects in African cities and towns. Cities face challenges to accessing and mobilizing for finance. Many local level projects lack sufficient scale and ambition, often requiring working beyond one's own local government's boundaries. City level projects also often require specialist technical expertise to develop, which smaller and intermediate local authorities often lack. ECI Africa is working in various ways to help bridge these very gaps and support cities to accessing finance for innovative projects like those discussed today. Currently, we have over 450 subnational government projects on our radar worth over 4 billion euros. This includes a range of sectors such as nature and biodiversity, water, urban development, all of which have enormous impact on the lives of our citizens and on climate security. ECI Africa have recently launched our Sustainable Finance Center with the aim of closing the finance gap. We have top finance specialists in our team exploring a range of finance options and are working with a range of stakeholders, a wide range of stakeholders, such as development banks, donors, and trust funds. As ECI Africa hosts the COMSA Secretariat and Technical Help Desk, that of the Global Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa, we'll have a wealth of capability and expertise. And, for example, COMSA is supporting 50 city-level projects with an estimated investment volume of over 400 million euros. COMSA projects have been taken up by financiers, amount already to over 280 million euros. So yes, there is progress, but we need more. In addition, COMSA as an initiative represents 152 million citizens in sub-Saharan Africa. That's 12.5% in fact of the entire world. Pursuing such finance and relationships requires a backing of strong and sound climate action planning and reporting. In our work on various projects and interventions, we are able to meet cities where they are on their respective resilient journeys, starting or already advanced, to support them in compiling robust climate knowledge, reports, and action plans. Through this work, it is therefore clear that the commitment of African cities to building climate-resilient futures runs deep. Cities are where most of the consumption that threatens nature takes place and where many decisions are made reaching far beyond the city limits. Through our work, ECI Africa aims to foster the development of innovative financial instruments by unlocking finance opportunities while also ensuring equitable and sustainable distribution of resources across our African cities. For example, our Brokering Innovation for Decentralized Climate Finance and Gender Equality, or our BRIDGE project, funded through the Canadian-Netherlands Step Change Partnership, is focusing on channeling adaptation funding directly to city governments and the vulnerable communities they serve in Cameroon, through strategic knowledge brokering and partnerships with regional finance authorities such as FACOM, community organizations and municipalities. This 3-year project has just begun and will strengthen the capacity of at least 30 knowledge brokers in Cameroon and their networks to unlock finance for gender-responsive and inclusive locally led adaptation, with learnings scaled in the Central African region and beyond. ICLEI Africa's broad profile of work makes us uniquely situated in this fight, working at the interface between the various polycrises and issues facing human settlements in Africa. We are not shying away from this challenge, and we are well positioned to meet this task head-on through our in-depth experience in working in this sector for over 30 years already. We are calling on all stakeholders to join us in this fight and are committed to working with our partners to unlock the potential of our wonderful African cities. We know we can never do this alone, and we would love to join hands with those proactive partners, such as those in the audience today here in Nairobi and on stage. Together we can make a difference for the future of our vibrant, thriving African cities of tomorrow. Thank you.